Hello and welcome. I'm so glad I get to spend some time with you all again today. Today's guest has written articles for a ton of elite publications and is going to share with us how we can do the same thing. But first, let me remind you that Patients Getting Paid is more than just this podcast. It's a membership community where people with chronic illness learn to find and create flexible remote work that both accommodates their health and generates an income. And the support you receive from other chronicpreneurs to help you find your path and travel it successfully is amazing. Come for the content, stay for the community. To learn more or to join us, go to patientsgettingpaid.com. Hope to see you on the inside. Kyle Young is a writer for Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, CNBC, Psychology Today, Forbes, and Business Insider. He's the founder of Growth Solutions LLC, a popular marketing agency, and today he's here to share how writing can be a means of generating flexible remote income and how to turn that exposure into other opportunities. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so appreciative of this. I saw a webinar that you did a few months ago, and before the webinar was even done, I emailed you because I knew you had information and experience and knowledge that could really help people with chronic illness to utilize writing as their path to becoming a chronicpreneur. So, if you don't mind, let's start at the beginning. What's your background, and how did you get started writing for these really elite publications?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I have a background in marketing, but always closely tied to writing. I've done a lot of copywriting in my career. So, writing emails and sales pages to try to explain products to people and give them an opportunity to buy them. I was an English tutor for years, even just in college. Had the opportunity to do a lot of ghostwriting as a part of my marketing work. So, writing books, and whether it's a book or even just like a video script for clients. And so I
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of experience with that. And ultimately, it was really through watching how some of my clients had leveraged writing for these major publications that I came to realize that that was something I should be doing too. And so I started writing at smaller sites, which is something that I kind of recommend that people do, and worked my way up to medium sites. And then ultimately started to really reach out to major websites and got told no several times, but started to get the yeses. And now I've gotten enough yeses that I can usually get most doors to open if I want them to.
That's so great. And I love how the example is you started here and worked your way up. So that's great advice in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
And that you got no's because I think some people can look. I try and caution people not to look at people who have been doing this for a while and compare themselves and think, well, I could never get there because you weren't there immediately either, right? You had to
No.
work for it. So that's a great thing to take note of. And as you start this journey for anybody who's interested. So, why is writing a great opportunity for our PGP listeners?
Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity in the sense that it's something that you can do with flexible hours to a certain extent. Sometimes you write on deadline, but
Yeah.
um, you get to choose what hours leading up to that deadline you invest in a piece. It's location independent, so you can do it. I remember actually, I had an article due the day my daughter was born,
Oh
and
my
we adopted our daughter, and so I was out of state, and we're in the NICU, and my daughter's asleep, little baby. My wife's asleep in one of the chairs. And so I thought, you know what? There's like, I was just too, I don't know,
Amped,
energized.
probably.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
amped's a good word.
bet.
Yeah, too amped by everything that had gone on that day. And so I thought, you know
Wow.
what? I'm going to work on my article. And so sitting in the NICU with my 1 day old baby and
Oh,
my very tired wife, I got my laptop out and worked on an article that um, later was published on one of the biggest book marketing blogs and did really well and created a lot of opportunities for me. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity to do it in different places, which is great. And it is
yeah.
something that you can get paid to do. One of the primary ways that I leverage writing is I use it to build credibility, which has then given me lots of opportunities as a consultant, as a speaker, as as a writer. But a lot of times I'm taking those accolades that you develop writing and leveraging them for other money making opportunities. But you can get paid just for the writing itself, and that's not uncommon. Freelance writing for major websites doesn't always pay super well. It's kind of counterintuitive. We normally think in life that the bigger the platform, the more we'll get paid to be a part of it. But what you'll find in television, not like a sitcom, but like in talk shows or in writing, a lot of times is sometimes it's actually the reverse. When you get to be really big, sometimes they actually pay less because it's such an
Crazy.
honor to
Yeah.
just be a part of it. So, I wrote two articles for a major website recently. I got paid $350 for each of them. They were about 600 words a piece.
Hmm.
I think I could have easily pitched more. I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, and so for the time being, I haven't written at that site again. But I made $700 writing 1,200 words, and so it is certainly possible to do that.
Yeah.
Some sites pay a lot, some sites don't pay anything at all, but you have an opportunity to kind of prioritize the sites that do. And so you absolutely there are certainly people who make a living as freelance writers, and you can also again leverage some of those writing accomplishments to get jobs as a
Do other
copywriter
things.
or
Yeah.
a number of other things.
Yeah. So that webinar that I mentioned that I reached out right in the middle
Yeah.
to you, you weren't, yeah, necessarily advocating for writing for the sake of writing, to your point, or at least not stopping there. You talked a lot in that webinar about how writing provided entree to other things for you personally, like speaking gigs and publishing gigs. So, can you share how writing for these publications has benefited you beyond just writing?
Yeah, absolutely. um you mentioned a couple of them, but a lot of speaking gigs. If somebody's trying to book a speaker to speak at their event, really what they're looking for is somebody who they can quickly communicate how impressive that person is. That person has a boss, and they want to be able to go into their boss's office and say, I just got Kyle to speak. He's a writer for the Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, CNBC, yada, yada, and quickly communicate that and, feel like they've added a good name to the list. They want to be able to communicate that to their boss. They want to be able to communicate that to the people who might be attending the event. They want to be able to communicate that, when they introduce you and you're about to
Yeah.
take the stage. And so that's one of the nice things about writing is we have so much respect as a culture for people who have written in prestigious places. And so you can do a lot when it comes to speaking gigs. When it comes to consulting, I've had a lot of opportunities there, because really you're ultimately selling your ideas, and that can be a tricky thing to do. I grew up as a kid, one of my favorite outings was we'd go to Sam's Club, kind of like Costco, and
Yeah.
sometimes they'd have little sample stands, and
Yeah.
you get to try, the dumpling or try the ice cream or the
Hmm.
cream puff or whatever they were selling. It's hard to do that with consulting, right? I can't break off a little piece of, I don't know, my experience and let you sample it. But writing gets you pretty close to that. When you write for
Yeah.
these major websites,
Great
it's
point.
easy to communicate. You don't know me, you're not sure if I'm the right fit, but I
Hmm.
can't tell you that an editor at the Harvard Business Review thought that my ideas were good enough to be worth publishing. And I can think of one interview in particular. I was fighting for a contract that at the time I thought of it as about an $80,000 contract. It's grown through supplemental work. It's probably close to like it's at least over 150 now, from this
Wow.
one client. And I remember sitting in that interview, and I was just facing some people who were very skeptical of me at the time. Um, just, convince us that your ideas are worth paying for.
Mm.
And I just said, well, I'm a writer for, and listed out some of those websites. And I
Yeah.
totally turned that conversation. And I actually went back a few weeks ago, I was getting lunch with one of them. And I said, just to be clear, like I've always sensed that that was kind of the turning point in this conversation, but I don't want to assume that if that's not true. And one of the women I was talking to said, oh no, that was it. Like
Yeah.
that was when all of a sudden you had something that nobody else we were interviewing had. And it worked well. So there's a lot of opportunities. I think there's also a lot of opportunities just to get better writing jobs. A lot of companies are hiring writers. That writing is usually remote work, whether they're hiring people to write articles for their specific website, or they're hiring somebody to write their sales copy, their emails, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of paid work out there for people who know how to write.
Yeah.
And if you're writing for big websites, you can put to bed pretty much any concerns about whether or not you really have that skill set.
The chops. Yeah.
Yeah, the
And that,
chops. That's right.
yeah. And as you say, I mean, that really does present you, with the cachet, I guess. Because I was impressed just with your webinar. And again, for the third time, I'm going to mention that before the end of it, I emailed you. And I didn't even know at that time what your background was. When I saw the kind of publications that you were writing for, I was like, holy cow, this guy is really the real deal. I mean, I was impressed just by you, but
I
yeah, that
appreciate that.
put me right over the edge when I saw everything, that all of these writers that I mean, excuse me, editors, I would assume, they have the ability to be incredibly picky. And they chose you, and lots of them chose you. So, yeah, I think that certainly helps with entree into anything and gives,
Well, and one thing I want to say really quickly is because it does take work to accomplish these things, but
yeah,
in a lot of ways, it's an accomplishment you can leverage for the rest of your life. It's kind of like, becoming maybe like a New York Times bestselling author, or, as for an athlete, it's winning a national championship. That there are certain things that, if you accomplish them, you can kind of
they're
leverage.
yours
Yeah, they're
forever.
yours.
Yeah.
And so I was just Googling, you may have heard me typing a little bit, but I was just Googling, like, when was Forbes founded? Forbes was founded in 1917, right?
Mm,
I've written for Forbes. That's a long time ago.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
the Harvard Business Review was founded in 1922. This is all according to Google, but um, that's a long time. And so
Yeah.
there are certain things. It's like, well, I've consulted with this company, and well, maybe that company goes out of business or
Right.
whatever might happen. But a lot of the major publications have been around for a very long time. We have every reason to assume they will be around for a very long time.
Yes.
And that's why, I mean, I have clients who I can think of a couple in particular who wrote for the New York Times like 20 years ago,
Right.
and that is still opening doors for them every single day because
I
they're
bet.
someone who's been published in the New York Times. And
Yeah, and it only takes one once to claim it. You are
oh
now
yeah,
a
absolutely.
published, right? It reminds me of, this is a little aside, but it does remind me of when I accidentally ran a half marathon. That's a whole nother story why it was an accident. But point being, I've only done it once, but I've been living off that one time. And
Oh
I
yeah.
will for the rest of my life. And that gave me the opportunity to get the little sticker for the back of my car that says 3.13.1. I don't ever have to do it again, but I'm
Unless you get a new
forever.
car.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, it's a magnet, so I can take it
Oh,
off.
okay, you can take it off, but no,
Yeah.
you're good to go.
Yeah. I'm a forward thinker that way. But yeah, but you do something once and you can certainly, for some things like that, you can live on it. Um, can anyone write for a major publication or major websites?
Yeah, my answer would be right now in this moment, no. But I think that everyone has the potential to get to that place.
Get
So,
there.
um, you know, if you have never written anywhere before, and the thought is, well, I'm gonna, email somebody at CNBC and tell them that they should publish my article, yeah, your odds are not very good.
Right.
Possible if you just have some really great experience or a unique angle on something. We're always
Mm-hmm.
looking for that, or editors are always looking for that. So if something's just happened, a tragedy or something in the news, and you have a really unique perspective on that because of your life experience, then maybe you could jump the line. But in general, it will take some work, but that work is just building a writing resume. And so that's what I encourage people to do, is just like you would move up the corporate ladder. You wouldn't graduate college and go apply to be the CEO of a major company. You would start by getting an entry level position. You'd do a good job. You'd move your way up to, middle management, senior management, and then you'd have a real shot at that executive level position.
Right.
And so I think writing is the same way. You can start by writing even just on websites like Medium. Medium lets anybody create an account, start publishing articles. They take articles on pretty much every topic in the world, and you can do some of that and develop some really strong writing samples. And then you can point back to those when you reach out to some publications that are reviewed by an editor
Oh,
and
great
say, hey, here's
idea.
some writing samples of what I've done
Yeah.
in the past. You get a few of those to say yes. Well, now you have an opportunity, especially if they're within the topic that you're wanting to write about, to go to a big editor and say, hey, I start a lot of those emails with, I just say, hi, I'm Kyle, I'm a writer for, and I list out my bylines,
Yeah.
and then I say my pitch. And the reason for that is just I want to make sure they actually read my email. And when
Right.
you can demonstrate that, you have an opportunity, because the way that these big publications work now, and really just almost every publication, is they take a volume approach. They try to publish so much content. So they're looking, and really what they just need is for you to convince them that it's worth taking the time to read your email, read your article, because there's a real chance that this is something they might want to publish. And when you
Mm-hmm.
say, I've written at these other places, that
Yeah.
checks off a lot of those boxes. So do I think that everybody in this moment can go out and do that? No. Do I think that pretty much everybody can get to that place and that it can be done pretty quickly? Yeah, I really do.
That's great. And I love the tip about writing for Medium first. That's a great idea.
Yeah, there are
Um,
other ones. That's not the only place where you can just create an account and start publishing articles, but it's one of them. And I think starting with sites like that is
yeah.
an easy way to start getting some writing on the internet. You can start your own blog and use those for writing samples. But if you don't have that, you don't need to. Just
Yeah.
create an account at one of these other sites. That they have beautiful layouts, so you don't have to worry about, is it going to look professional? Is it going to load quickly or anything like
Yeah.
that? It's going to look great,
That's their
and you're
problem.
that's their problem. That's right.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great idea. So what are editors looking for?
Mm. It's a good question. So I think editors are looking for two things. I think they're looking for articles that will, one, their readers will find useful. So it's like it's not something that's so out of left field that it's just not even relevant. And two, and this one's probably the bigger one, is they're looking for articles that'll generate traffic. So they are wanting to get as many eyeballs on their website as possible. Many of these sites, not all, but many of these sites monetize through advertisements. So there's a direct correlation sometimes between the number of eyeballs that show up and the amount of money they make. In some cases, they're just trying to get people to, subscribe for premium articles, whatever the case may be. But
Yeah.
traffic is a huge part of the business model for any major website, or almost any major website. So they're looking for an article that they think will generate some traffic. And again, without being something that their readers just kind of roll their eyes at. So that's kind of the constraint. But if you can think of an angle of something that you think people would want to read, then you have a lot of opportunity. And so a few angles that I teach, I have a course where I give like 12 of them, but a couple of them, one is something in the news potentially. If there's a current event going on, pretty much every major website's going to want to be talking about that.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
if you
Great
can
point.
speak into that event in a unique way, that's something that they might be looking for because it could bring a lot of traffic. Another thing that can work is, in some cases, you will find search terms. This isn't always something that people do, but sometimes you'll learn that a whole lot of people are Googling a certain topic, and there's tools that you can use to identify that. And sometimes you can go to an editor with that and say, 100,000 people a month are Googling this term. I'd love to write an article on it. So those are two. I could give you a lot more, but really, you're just looking for an angle where you think your readers are going to like this, and it has the
Yeah.
potential to kind of go viral. And the last thing I'll say about that is just really the way they're going to vet that is in your headline, in the headline you submit, or if they're able to see it and immediately make it better in their own minds. But the headline is really what makes an article go viral. You read it, hopefully you like the article, but they're looking for, if somebody just sees this headline on Twitter or on Instagram, or if somebody just sees this headline in a text message from a friend, are they going to click?
Yeah.
And so if you can get a really dialed in headline, a lot of times that's kind of the decision point.
Great. So you're talking about, sort of sending query letters, right? But what about you as, an established writer with these elite publications now? Are they coming to you with ideas, or are they just coming to you and saying, do you have anything? Because we know you and we like you and you've been great for us. What do you got? Or is it always the other way?
That's a great question. So I do get like syndication requests sometimes, people who want to take an article I've written and republish it. I just had somebody recently who wanted to take one of my Psychology Today articles, translate it into Japanese, and then republish it for a Japanese publication.
Wow.
So I do get some syndication requests. I do sometimes have editors I'm working with who reach out and say, do you have another idea? Or, would you be willing to take a stab at this? So that does happen. I don't think I've ever had somebody just reach out to me out of the blue from a major publication and say, would you write for us? I don't think that has ever happened. But I do absolutely have relationships with editors where sometimes they're the ones saying, hey, when can you send us another article idea? Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. That's great.
Editors get so many pitches that
I imagine,
they're not out looking, but if you get in front of them, you establish that relationship, and that's who they're going to go back to. Yeah.
Right. And to that point, they get so many that's why I really loved what you said about when you send a note to them that, just put it out there first thing, like, I've written for this and I've done this. And that's great because other people aren't going to have that same thing. So they can ditch the other people and go with you.
That's right.
So what mistakes should new writers avoid?
Mistakes that new writers should avoid. Something that I recommend people do is, especially if you're doing what I just recommended and you're kind of trying to move your way up, is kind of write with the end in mind. So, maybe you're writing an article on Medium. The thing that would be obvious to do is, well, I'm going to go read some other articles on Medium, see how long they are, see what kind of tone they take, and publish an article similar to those. I would actually advise you against that. I would tell you to go look at the publications that you want to end up on. Let's just, like I write for Business Insider. So go read Business Insider if that's somewhere where you want to write ultimately. Look at how long their articles are and look at what kind of tone they take and look how they format articles. And then go actually write that article on Medium. And there's 3 reasons for that. One is just that writing articles at the level that it would take to get on a major website takes practice. And so this way you're getting that practice. A second reason is you're ultimately trying to create writing samples that you can later use to impress an editor at a website like that. And so what you really need to do is you need them to read that article and think, hey, I would have published this. Like, this looks like an article that I would have been proud to publish.
Right.
So that's another reason why I would encourage you to kind of start with the end in mind. And then the third reason is it does, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes create syndication opportunities where if somebody sees an article, it does well on whatever platform it's on, they might reach out to you and want to publish it. I have a friend named Todd who wrote an article on Medium and it did pretty well. And he gets an email one day from Time Magazine saying, can we syndicate this article?
Wow.
And so that created a relationship with an editor at Time Magazine, and he got the post published there. And that's a pretty big deal. I've never written
Yeah,
for Time Magazine. I would like
that
to
is
write for Time
huge.
Magazine. So, but that only happens if you're writing the article in a way where it's a fit for the websites you want to end up on, not necessarily the websites you're starting on.
Right. And just to clarify, a term you're using is syndication. So
Yeah.
is that the difference? Like, rather than they may find it's an article that you've already created and they want to basically license it. Is that a good
Yeah, I appreciate you
definition?
asking that. Syndication in this context is pretty much just a website republishing something you've already written with your permission.
Got
Or
it.
if you write it on a website where you have an editor and they own the content, republishing it with the editor's permission. So they're taking an article that already exists and then putting it on their site without removing it from the original site. And usually at the bottom of those articles, you'll see this article originally appeared on this other website, click here to see
Yeah.
the original version.
Yeah. Very cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking.
Um, what um, what do you think is the number one key to success?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know if
No
it's the
big
most,
ask here. What's the number one thing?
yeah, I don't know if it's the most foundational necessarily, but what I call my number one secret to success is following up. I think following up, I mean, in pretty much every
Good
area of
one.
life, but especially with writing,
True.
is just huge. If
Yeah.
you, I actually have a lesson in my course where I kind of graph this out for people. I tell you what, I'm just going to tell you the numbers really quickly.
Great.
But basically, let me think. Oh, sorry, I don't want to pause while I do this. Let me start. Let me get a
Okay.
train of thought going, and then I'll pull up the deck. If you just send a pitch to somebody, there's a good chance you won't hear back. A lot of times you have to follow up several times to get, sometimes even just to get the editor's attention, much less to get a article all the way to the finish line.
Yeah.
And so I have found that that's kind of my number one secret to success. So, for
That's a
example,
good
when I
one.
wrote for the Harvard Business Review, it wasn't this year, but I sent my initial pitch email on July 6th, and it wasn't until August 10th that I got confirmation the piece would actually be published. So that's over a
Mm.
month. And in
Mm-hmm.
between that time, there were 22 emails that went back and forth. I sent 13 and I received 9. And I think a lot of people think I'm going to send in this article. I'm either going to get a yes or a no, or I'm not going to get a response, and then I'm going to move on. And in reality, that's not normally how it works. I'm looking here at Business Insider, 29 emails back and forth. I sent 18, I received 11, and both of those resulted in published articles.
Yeah.
But they both took close to a month to get all the way there, and a lot of back and forth. So if you, excuse me, if you just send in an article and then kind of wait to see what happens, it's
Cross
pretty
your
rare
fingers
that,
and hope. Yeah,
yeah, it's
that's
pretty
not the
rare it's going
way.
to get to the finish line.
Right.
They're kind of looking, in some ways that's even just because I've been an editor at smaller sites as a consultant, and sometimes you're almost waiting to just see, this is somebody that I'm maybe going to
Maybe a
need to, I
test.
want to see if they're going to promote the article, I want to see if they're going to be willing to make changes to make it better. So sometimes, yeah, it is just almost a little bit of a test.
Mm-hmm.
Let's if they're really serious about this, they'll follow up.
Yeah, I love that. I love everything you just said. And I think sometimes people have a attitude, well, I don't really want to bother them. So you just
Yeah.
clarified that that's not, don't have that mindset.
Yeah, it's certainly possible to do it poorly, but um, it's it's also possible to do it well. I mean, I think the most obvious example is if you're writing something really timely, like, about Valentine's Day, you
Right.
shouldn't be following up on that in March, right? But in general, it's worth doing. And I normally, if I'm about to stop following up, if this is kind of the last call, so to speak, I try to always draw attention to that in the last email. I had one once with a major website, where I emailed them and they didn't answer. I emailed them again, they didn't answer. And so I sent them one more. And in that third email, I said, just want to be clear, this is the last time I'm going to reach out, but I wanted to, ping you one more time. And
Yeah.
that time they responded. And so it's not uncommon for, if you are about to wrap up, just make that clear. And then, like most people, we're impacted by deadlines. And when we see that this is my last chance to connect
Right.
with this person, a lot of times that's what kind of moves the needle.
Yeah. Love it. Great advice. You have a course on how to write for major publications.
I do.
And we have worked together on this, and I'm going to put this link in the show notes, but just so everybody hears it, you can go to patientsgettingpaid.com/writing, and that will bring you directly to that course. And I just thought of a question for that course because I'm putting myself in the mindset I'm signing up. Let me just tell you that right now.
Well, yeah, thank you.
See everybody in the course. But one of my questions is, do you direct people where to find the editors, or who to query, and how to go about doing that? Is that part of this course?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Excellent.
I kind of break it down by into three categories. There's websites that anybody can write for, like Medium, so there's no editor involved. Then there are smaller websites that have editors, and so I have a whole lesson on how to find those people. And then there's big websites that have editors. I have a whole lesson on how to find them. But yeah, I tell you about a couple of tools. One is kind of like a job board where a lot of websites post articles that they want to have written, and if they're paying you, they'll tell you how much they're going to pay and some of their requirements. And so that can be a really useful tool. I also tell you guys about a newsletter that somebody who goes through and curates. A lot of times editors will put things out on social media and say, I'm looking for an article about this. Is there anybody who can write that? Let me know if you can. And they'll include their email address, which is,
Ding, ding, ding. There's your
yeah,
gold.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's gold.
We have
And
a
so
winner.
there's a really great newsletter where somebody goes through and syndicates a lot of those. And then they send them out to you and say, like, here's the 50 writing opportunities I saw in the last few days
Wow.
across social media. And they do a
Nice.
really good job. And so I talk about that too. So yeah, I definitely break down how you find those people. And it's been useful for me. I mentioned that I've written for Business Insider. I actually found that opportunity through the newsletter that I was talking about.
Mm,
And the newsletter is just telling you, here's an editor, here's their email address, here's a topic they're interested in. You
yeah.
still then have to know how to pitch them. But I
Right.
knew how to do that. And so I wrote for Business Insider twice, made about $700. And then Psychology Today, I actually have a column with Psychology Today, and I got that by the job board one that I was talking about. Psychology Today had a form publicly available on the internet for people who could make a case that they were deserving of a column, and I filled it out and followed up. In both cases, a lot of follow up, and in both cases, I got what I wanted.
That's fantastic. Well, I can see there's so much value in this course and everything. I appreciate you being here today and sharing
Well,
all
thank you for
this.
having me.
And I just think what a fantastic opportunity for those of us who need or desire to work from anywhere, and have any kind of ability to write. And I love that you are bringing all of these resources together in one place where we can learn about all of this and utilize, your experience and whatnot. So again, that's patientsgettingpaid.com/writing. It will be in the show notes. And also, Kyle's agreed to do a deeper dive with a live workshop inside Patients Getting Paid community. So, if you want to be a part of that, go to patientsgettingpaid.com and join us on the inside of the PGP membership community. Kyle, I can't thank you enough. Thanks so much for being here. And I did want to also say congrats on your daughter. When was that?
Oh, she's 4 now.
She's 4.
But thank you very much. She had a birthday
Oh.
recently, and we just actually got back from a trip to Disney World. And so, yeah, I'm very thankful for her.
Oh, I literally just had another call with someone who has a 4-year-old daughter as well. And I said, 4 was my favorite age when they were little. Like, 4 was just old enough that they could do some stuff for themselves and they could,
Yeah,
it made sense when you told them not to do stuff and all the, I
right.
just loved 4 with both my kids. When they got to 4, I was like, shoo, we got out of the, I laughed about the terrible 2s. I thought the 2s were nothing. I thought 3 was hell on earth. And 4 was like, I'm breathing again. So anyway,
I heard somebody
congrats on that.
call him a three-nager. So some of
Oh,
us have
that's
had some
perfect.
three-nagers.
Yes, yes, that's a great description of it. Anyway, congratulations on that because
Thank you
there's
very
nothing
much.
nothing better than those little kidlets. Anyway, thanks so much for doing this. Really, really
Thank
appreciate it.
you. My pleasure.
Take care.